Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome. Today we're having a gardening with the master with Mr. Dan Boland today. I'm going to go over a few upcoming events with you real quick, and I'll review them at the end. But we are doing our quarterly drawing at the beginning of April, so you've got to the end of March to get your referrals. Our next Ed event is March 25th, and it's about wealth transfer. And then we have one on April 8th. And that's risk management. And then we have two double token events or double ticket events. One is on the 13th, that will be at Natalia's. And then on the 15th, that one will be at Props in Warner Robins. And then everybody remembers our food truck and shred from last year. We're doing that again. That's going to be on April 22nd from 4 to 6 p.m. And you will be able to bring in your stuff to shred early if you would like to. And I'm not exactly sure how early, so we'll get back to you on that. Hey, good morning. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful and willing participant, Mr. Dan Boland. You might recognize the last name. He is Alicia's father-in-law. This is some pictures of his beautiful garden from last year. There's some sweet potatoes and some greens and all those peas. And these are his tomato plants here on the left. Almost as big as he is in that one, or actually looks bigger. Dan Boland has grown up to 100 tomato plants in a season. He is trying to scale back to just 40 plants this year. He and his wife, Ina, make sure to put all his fruits and vegetables to good use by canning and freezing them each year. And last year, they put up 100 quarts of tomatoes. He and his wife, Ina, have been married for 60 years. They have 7 kids and 23 grands. And he's been gardening for about as long as he's been married. I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Dan Boland.
Hello, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today. This is Dan and Alicia Boland's show and tell about gardening and vegetable gardening. So we're glad you're interested in growing a garden. Start off by, if you're that interested in having a garden this year or in the future, the first thing you got to do is to decide where you're going to plant it, a site for your garden. And the most important thing is to put it where you get the most sunlight, get 6 to 8 hours of sun each and every day. That's very important. And also where you have a water supply. Fortunately, I'm here and have a total of 1.25 acres on this lot. So my garden is about 50 by 75. So I realize that each one of you don't have the size garden that I have. So I'll try to talk through some things that will interest you and will connect with you and your ideas of a garden. And you don't have to have a 50 by 75 garden. You do if you're going to can 100 quarts of tomatoes. But let me tell you this, you start small. Everybody, I started small. I remember when I just had 3 tomato plants in the flower bed where I live. And that's the reason I bought this place, because it had a bigger yard where I could have a big garden, and it keeps me young. Shanna's already mentioned I've got 23 grandchildren. So between my grandchildren and growing a garden, I'm just like brand new. So let's get started. Also, when you decide where you're going to put your garden, mine is located so that I get the sun as it comes up in the morning on the east and settles in the west. So I plant my rows accordingly, east and west. That way they get the most sunlight on all the rows that you plant. If you're planting some corn or okra, other things that are tall. And my tomato plants, you'll see from some of the pictures, my better boys can get a lot of vine to them. I remember one year I had to get on a ladder and get my tomatoes out of my apple tree. So your vines, and so you want to plant them so they don't shade the rest of your garden. You got to make a plan. I have a little map. If she can pick this up, I do that each year. It's just a layout of my garden. That's the way it's shaped. If you were standing here looking at my garden. And what I do, I write down where I've got each thing planted for this year. And you'll see later where I'm going to put in my tomatoes this year. And as Shannon mentioned, I have cut down. I'll be 82 next Monday if you want to send me a present. But I'm cutting down. I'm going to do about 40 this year. I have been as high as 100 tomato plants in years past. But they may not can as much as we have, but we're going to still can. It's important to make this map because it's important to rotate your crop. You cannot plant your tomato plants or most any other vegetables in the same area of your garden every year. They'll develop a disease, and different potatoes can create a problem planting on top of those. So you rotate your crop. And even as big as my garden is, it's hard to rotate because you don't have that big a place to rotate to. So when you're in a smaller garden like you will perhaps have, that may be difficult as well. But let me just mention to you, you don't have to have a large garden. You may not have the space for a large garden. My wife and I served as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints about 15 years ago in Denver, Colorado. And we lived in apartments. And so any of you that's ever lived in apartments, you know you don't have any space to plant a garden. Well, we did have a little porch balcony. I went to Home Depot and bought 4 5-gallon buckets and knocked holes in the bottom. You got to have it so that the water drains. And you can also get your top dirt there, a potting soil. And I had 4 of them, 2 tomatoes and 2 jalapenos. I love jalapenos, and I sure love tomatoes. And so they did fine. With a small bucket, you can move it to where you get the sunlight on it. And that's what happened. When we moved in that apartment, we were there 6 months. I passed it on to my next door neighbor. So a lot of people that don't have a lot of space, they raise their gardens in what's called raised beds. This is where you get some 2 by 10 to 12s, about 8, 15 feet long, however big you want to make your raised bed, and you have space for. And that works for a lot of people. So whatever, meets your need and your space, that's what you need to work with. But let me tell you this, plant what you eat. As we've mentioned about the large quantity of tomatoes and green beans, that's what we eat a lot of. There's a total of 43 in my family, and they love to eat my groceries. So we do a lot of canning of green beans and tomatoes. You might want to try things. I try different things once in a while. I've been talking about for the last 2 years now about asparagus. But don't plant asparagus unless you're going to be there for a while, because it takes 3 years, I'm told, in reading in the gardening book, for asparagus to start producing. But it's important to plant what you like and what you grow. I have friends that they use buckets and they plant cilantro. I got one Spanish lady friend. She grows her own cilantro because she uses a lot of it. So plant what you use and what you like and what you can eat. Go to the stores, order online, good quality seed and plants. And it's important that seed is just like everything else. It's going up every year in its prices, and it gets costly to plant a garden. And if you start spending a lot of money, and you'll see some of the equipment that I have here, but it's been accumulated for 50 years. So you have to go by and start small and build up. And something slipped my mind that I was going to tell you, but you can start with the seeds. What I was going to tell you. I put mine in the freezer. I love zipper peas, for example. And every year you cannot get zipper peas. They're grown in Texas in big seed farms. And 2 years ago, the drought, there was no zipper pea seeds. So I had to revert back to my old standby purple hull peas. But if you can find them, put them away in the freezer. I also, a few years back, our church encourages us to have food storage. So I ordered a kit of seed, different varieties. It had tomato seed, some corn, and you name it, all in a small box that I put away in my freezer in case there came a day that I could not find seed in the store. So that's one little tip for you. I start my tomato plants and my pepper plants from seed. And this is the way it's done in these little seed starters. And you also got to use the right kind of starting soil. Now, there's a lot of different potting soils, but you've got to get the one that says seed starting potting soil. And you put it in these little trays, pack it down, wet it down good, and put your seed just barely under the soil. And tomatoes, in about 3 days, they start popping through. Now, it takes a little longer for peppers. And I've already started my peppers. Now, in the next couple of days, I'll start my tomatoes. Now, you'll see over here later that I have already picked up. We went to the beach 2 weeks ago. I stopped in Baxley, Georgia. If you're ever down through Baxley, stop at Thompson's Seed and Feed. They get their plants from a different source than up here. Bonnie's, they charge more, number one. But anyway, I picked up while I was in that direction a dozen of their tomato plants. Because like I said, they're cheaper, number one, and they're beautiful. I start my vegetable garden, spring garden, about the second Saturday of April. You've got to wait until it's over 55 degrees at night for that soil to be warm enough for your seed to germinate. Otherwise, it's going to just lay there and rot, and you'll be planting over. Some of us get anxious. Some of my garden buddies the same way, and they want to get started early and plant. And there again, if those nights are not warm enough, your seed's going to rot and you're going to be planting again. So you're better off to just wait about that second week of April when you know for sure that there's no frost and no cold weather and it's above 55 degrees, and then start planting your garden. You need to probably, in most cases, get your soil analyzed so that you know that your soil is sufficient for growing your plants and vegetables. You can go to the county agent office. Ours here in Houston County is located down in Perry at the county courthouse. And you get these little bags from them. And it tells you exactly on the back of the bag, exactly how to go about it. You go around and take a sampling in several different areas of your garden. You put it in a bucket and mix it all together. Then you take that and fill it in the bag, and it goes to the University of Georgia to be analyzed. And they'll send it back to you with complete listing of what your soil needs. So that's another tip that you need to remember. Now I use, I think I set my bag over here. I use 10-10-10. That's a good all-around vegetable growing fertilizer. Some people use 5, 10, 15. It just depends on what your soil is needs. Now the next thing you do is soil preparation. That means I've already been out here earlier this week with my tiller. tilling my soil up, and you got to get your soil and where you're going to plant conditioned properly by plowing it and tilling it. I'll show you over here. If this is my tiller, and that's a little 17-inch tiller. But for me and the size garden I've got, you can't do without the tiller. And if you're planting a strip garden, something that I failed to mention a while ago, you're talking about not having the space. You can do more than what you think. You may tell your friends or to yourself, you don't have space to plant a garden, but you can take one place there in your grass and just plant what's called a strip garden. And you can grow some tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, whatever you desire in a small area. Now I've got another small tiller. It was donated to me by my son. He picked it up somewhere pretty cheap and put a new carburetor on it and brought it to me. I thought, well, I don't want that little old thing. That thing's... Anyway, I wouldn't part with that now. If he came back out here to get it, I'd probably take my hoe hammer and hit him in the head. That thing comes in handy. You can pick it up. Even I let my wife use it. And you can get into close places and areas in your garden that you can't with this big one. So I've been blessed to inherit a lot of things to help me with my garden. Okay. After you've conditioned your garden, then you're going to start the planting your garden, laying off your rows. Now, if Alicia can follow me over here just a minute, we'll I'll show you this. And you got to have your, if you got a garden my size, you can't do without a guideline. And I've got a ruler, a yardstick. For example, like my tomatoes, you'll see over here behind me, that's where I'll be planting 3 rows of tomatoes. I went this week and got to the horse farm and got some horse manure. It should have been done earlier. I usually go to the ag center because you can get it free. This was a small charge for this, but that's where I'll be tilling that under. I just wanted to leave it there before I plowed it under so you could see what I'm talking about. And this is some of it here. And I'll show you as we go through planting a tomato. I use some of that to put under. The only problem with the ag center, due to the pandemic, they haven't had any because they haven't had horse shows, cow shows, and goat shows or whatever they have. And so they haven't had any. The lady told me this week that they'll have it at the end of the month. So I'm behind time on getting that. So I went to the horse farm. I'm going to tell you about something here. First of all, let me tell you, when I plant my butter boys, I put them in these wire cages. This, I think, is referred to as non-climb fence wire. You can get it at Lowe's. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, it gets costly to buy these things, but once you invested in it, these cages will last you for years. You put those around and you've got to stake them down. And my tomato plants, as I mentioned, they'll get 6 feet or better in height. They'll start back down the cage. And the weight on the tomatoes and the wind would blow them over. So you got to use these stakes and stake those down to keep the wind from blowing them over. But what I'd like to, now on this, while we're here, you can, if you've got small area, now these are the small tomato stakes. And for years before I invested in the wire cylinders, I made my own. I'd get the treated 2x4s or whatever and rip them down and make my own tomato stakes because I needed them higher than what you can buy at the store. This is about what you can pick up at Lowe's or Walmart. Now these cages, they were donated to me too. I have a brother that'll turn 91 in May. So he gave up gardening and passed these on to me. Now I use these with my pepper plants, my jalapenos, my bell pepper, eggplant, and those type things. So you want to keep that in mind. Those are good for those. I don't know if it'll show up here. Alicia might can show you where I've already started my onions coming up. And I've got where these stakes are. I've got 2 rows of Irish potatoes, 1 row of reds and 1 row of white. If I'm sad, I'll eat red potatoes. If I'm happy, I'll eat white potatoes. Okay, let's move on over here. Now, this is called a Japanese tomato ring. I don't know how it gets that name, Japanese, other than in Japan. I understand that they don't have much ground space. Everything goes straight up. So I guess that's the same way with planting that garden. And I liked it. And I've used this for years. I've quit because I'm getting old and lazy. And you got to move your stuff and rotate it. You build this up to about 4 feet high with leaves, some of the compost from the fairground, and I throw a little bit of fertilizer in there and I build that bed up. Well, the idea is to plant your tomato plants on the outside of the cage. Now, where opposite the small cylinder, they'll be on the inside of the cage, but these are round. So if you're lacking for space to plant, you might want to try one of these. Now, the only problem, this cage is made out of concrete reinforcement wire. And so that's kind of costly to get. But again, once you invest in it, it stays with you for a long time. I've had these cages for a long time. Anyway, I'm going to show you, before I do, I'll finish telling you, once you fill this up and have this is almost like a compost bed. And when you finish the end of your season, you can pull these wire cages back up, set them out of the way, and till that into your garden. And that builds up your soil. But the idea is, once you plant these 4 or 5 tomato plants around the Japanese tomato ring, you water them several times. After that, you water the bed. Stick your water hose over in the bed. That sends all the nutrients and moisture down to the roots of your tomato plants. And I've had these cages plus some in rows in the same years. And these will last longer. These will still be with me when those in the other cylinders are long gone. So that's one advantage of it. But we'll go ahead and I use a post hole digger. Even in mine that I'm going to put in the rows, I use my post hole diggers. And I'll take my yardstick and flip it off and mark it with the hoe 3 feet apart. Then I'll come back along where I made those marks and dig my hole. Everybody's got their own technique and way of doing things. I find it easier to just to use a post hole diggers because I'm going down pretty deep. You can see I'm getting into some clay here. And that's what you want to do. You want to get on down there. And I'll tell you what, gardening is hard. It's a lot of hard work. You know, Alicia and all my other friends, they want me to give them my tomatoes. They don't realize how hard I've worked to grow my tomatoes. But anyway, I'm just joking. I share them with my neighbors, my family, and that's one of the things I love about gardening, to share with my friends and my family. What I do is I start off and I here's my 10-10-10 right here. I start off, I put me a nice little handful of fertilizer right down in that hole. And then I use my compost and put right on top of it. Okay? And then you want to put some soil on top of it. You won't never plant right on top of your fertilizer for sure. Now the compost would have probably been okay. But if you put those roots of this small tomato plant, you're gonna burn the roots on your tomato plant, kill it. So always put dirt in any kind of planting. This single row here where I've got the guideline, that's what you call a single row gardening. I'll talk to you in just a little bit about a wide row. But you'd go down there and open that fur up deeper than what I've got. I just got it marked off so you can see how I run my rows. And I try to keep them straight. That's the reason I use a guideline. I start off from a given point that allows me to keep everything going straight in my garden. You'd go down and put a broadcast of fertilizer down in there in the furrow. You come back and roll some dirt over it because you don't want your seed on top of that fertilizer. So remember that. And then you come back and drop your seed in. Well, let's go ahead and let me show you with the tomato plant. Like I said, I got these down in Baxley. I wish I lived down there where I could get all of my stuff. I wouldn't seed anything from seed. You pull off all your little limbs, leave nothing but just a little top on them. That way it allows your root system to develop rather than trying to put off your limbs. You take those away. I got a piece of paper here. The good book says that you seal around this as a shield to keep the nematodes and the grub worms from getting to the root system. But you put it all the way we want to see, because we just want just the very tip top coming out of that. So I'll throw a little bit more dirt. You want everything buried, but just the very top of that tomato plant.
So when you say the good book, what book are you talking about?
I'm talking about my gardening book. Yeah, that's the good book. I tell you what, that good book kind of messed me up last year. I'm going to tell you, I don't care how long you've been gardening, you learn something every year. And I'll give you a little idea about that. Last year, I had my jalapenos and bell pepper. The plants was stubby and the fruit was small, wasn't putting on any decent size. And I was planting what they call the giant jalapenos. Supposed to have been a big, they didn't get any size to them. So I went into the good book, the gardening book, and it said to put a little Epsom salt in a spray bottle of water and to spray those blossoms on those peppers. Well, I did that. And I got to thinking, if it would help those pepper plants to grow and do better, it ought to do well on tomatoes. So I had about 50 tomato plants that I usually get late tomatoes off of them up to frost and freezing, and I pull them off, put them in a little room off my garage, and I'm eating them tomatoes on New Year's Day. Well, this case, I sprayed all those tomato plants, and it killed every one of them. That was a lesson Dan Bolin learned this last year. And believe me, I won't do it again. So keep that in mind. Okay, you always want to make sure you pack the dirt good around so that the root system, that dirt will get in there and help that root system to grow and develop. Okay, every man's got to have it's important. It wouldn't hurt anything if you got the time and energy to put a little water down in the hole before you set the tomato down in there. But you definitely want to wet it down good when you get done. That helps to pull that dirt in around those root systems. And boy, I'll tell you what, it'll get 6 feet high here in just about 2 months. Come out here and we'll pull a tomato off way up here. So, okay, let me explain one other thing that you might can use. My gardening book that I have, the man that produced it, he believed in wide row gardening, meaning the width of a iron rake. That rake is 16 inches. Okay, I make mine about 17 because that's what my tiller is. And if you put it in a fast forward gear, it don't dig real deep, but it just makes a nice bed. And the idea behind the wide row, you got less walking paths. It develops more plant and foliage. It helps to block out the sun to keep the weeds from coming up. It keeps the moisture in. You got more produce, more vegetables, and fruit on your vines. And most of the things, peas, beans, Dick Raymond, he planted on a wide row. And so I've been using that same system. The only difference is I've got a little planter. I'll show you this real quick. Now here again, I priced one in that feed and seed store in Baxley last week. $125 for this little planter. Well, I'm a poor boy. I would never be able to buy one like that. That one was given to me. Boy, I tell you, the Lord has blessed me in mysterious ways. My son, Alicia's husband, he bought a rototiller here a few years back from a friend, and he threw in a practically brand new seeder. My son already had one, so he donated this to me. But as you can see, it's on the same process of a big tractor planting a field. It opens the furrow, it drops the seed, it pulls the dirt back across, and the back wheel packs the dirt on the seed, all in one process. I'm getting old and I'm getting lazy. I work hard, but I'm lazy, and I'm going to take the path of least resistance. And so I take this, and you can go down here, and where Dick Raymond, who developed this wide row method, he sowed his seed. Then you got to go along down the road with your rake and pull dirt over your fertilizer to start with, get it covered up. Then he comes back and he sowed his beans or peas, whatever he's planting. Then you got to go along and kick the dirt back over that, cover it. When you get through, it's almost like a raised bed. All right, I'm too lazy for that. So with this being donated, I plant my beans, and I go down 3 times. I make 3 rows, and I've got just a small hoe. If I can find it, it's just a pointed hoe, and it's just the right size to drag down through there, just like a big tractor would be going. It rolls the dirt to the outside row and the next inside row. Go down, and then you catch your outsides. You got to do that. You got to stay on top of weeds, or they'll just take you over. If you think you're going to plant a garden and just put it out there and it's going to come up and produce, and you're done with it, you've got another thought coming, because it takes a lot of work to just keep the weeds and everything out of it. So that's one of the things. I don't know if you have a place large enough that you can consider the wide rows, but that works for me. Like I said, I plant a lot of green beans, snap beans, and I do it on the wide row. I plant zipper peas. I plant them on this wide row. I get more of them and I can get them into a smaller space. Let me just see if we've covered everything that we wanted to talk about. There's things here that you can to control your pest. Now, I believe in this diatomaceous. It's not as quite as potent. People nowadays like organic. I don't know that much about the organic business. Something gets on my beans and all, I get the spray and spray them. This is 7 spray. But this diatomaceous, we get it at Lowe's to kill ants. And it's there's one variety of the diatomaceous I've gotten that I take it as a tonic. So this might kill you, but the other kind won't kill you. But let's see if we've just everything I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, now the big thing is harvest time. You got to keep your fruit picked off so that it'll keep bearing. You got to harvest at the right time, and that's a job too. Bending over picking green beans is a lot of work. So you got to harvest your stuff. That's what it's all about. I just wanted to tell you about the canning and freezing. Of course, most of you probably know that you can tomatoes. You can do them in just what they call a hot water bath. Now, squash, green beans, that's because tomatoes have a lot of acid in them, but these you've got to put under pressure. Green beans and squash and other, probably if you did potatoes, in the pressure cooker. Now, this pressure cooker is older than I am. Came from my grandmother. I picked up a newer one in later years. I prefer this one here. It's better than these new ones. Just like everything else. That's my pickled okra. I pickle it with jalapeno. It gets on just enough hot out of that jalapeno to be good. And they are, I have people coming from miles around to get my pickled okra. So keep that in mind. Here's one little trick here you can use to spray. You put your diatomaceous in the box up here and you can go down your row. Try to make everything as fast as you can. You can't spend all day out in the garden. I wanted to just mention to you also in closing about fruit trees. Alicia might can pick up a couple of these that's my plum trees that's already blooming. If it gets cold and freeze comes, I'm going to cry because they're looking real good now. That very tree right there, I didn't get the first plum off of it last year because we got late cold weather. So I'm praying every day that it'll stay warm enough for me to get some plums this year. Got pomegranate, a Granny Smith apple. I got the scuppernong vine, muscadine, and my blueberries. That's my prize. 20 gallons of blueberries last year. So you might want to try some blueberries. You got to get at least 2 different varieties because they have to cross-pollinate. Remember that. And these have been going now for about 20 years, so they've been here for a while. I hope what I've shared with you has been helpful to you. I enjoy gardening, and I think you will too. You just have to do whatever is comfortable for you and what your space will allow and what your pocketbook will allow. Because like I said, seeds is costly, fertilizer is costly. And you know, if you keep going, you could almost go to the farmer's market and buy you food. But you cannot beat good fresh tomatoes right out of the garden or green beans. So keep that in mind. Thank you very much. This is brought to you by Security First Financial Management. They're located in Dublin, Georgia, and Macon. So, hey, you're going to get a $1,400 check. Call Bill Dana, Mr. Bill Dana. In Dublin and Macon. When you get that $1,400, go see him and invest it. I'm thinking about doing it myself.
Thank you for that endorsement.
Being with you.
We have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Dan.
Okay.
All right. So somebody wanted to know about their tomato plants. They said they never last the growing season. They have them on automatic watering, and they're located in a full sun area. They've tried all different kinds of varieties, but they just seem to die and they don't get as large. Any suggestions to help increase his yield and keep the plants producing longer?
Well, I don't know what variety they're using. They should all be good and produce. I'm going to tell you, I've tried others, and Better Boy is my favorite. It produces more for me. But if they've got the sun and now you can overwater things. I don't know about this automatic. Now I've got my water supply, and I meant to mention it earlier, on a 2-hour timer. That's because I don't want to stand out here and hold the water hose on them. So I got a sprinkler system that sets up right in the middle of my garden. It'll cover the entire garden just about. And I can set it up to as long as 2 hours. Now the gardening book, and I'll show you, I don't know if everybody's able to see it, but this is important. You can go to a bookstore. This one's probably not published anymore. This guy, he died years ago. But any good gardening book, and also, as you know as well as I do, you can Google anything on that computer. So that's how I learned a lot of things about various plants, my fruit trees. I Google on that computer and find out all about it. So I don't know exactly what would be causing their problem, but they might want to try a different variety tomato plant, but make sure they're not overwatering.
Also, you talked about the tomato plant preparation, how you put in the fertilizer and then the manure and then the soil and then the plant. Someone wants to know, I know you planted the tomato pretty deep, but how much of the top should you have?
Just about 2 leaves left on the top.
Okay.
But from the soil, how high, how deep, and how much plant is actually showing out?
A lot of plant. I mean, just use
2 leaves. The rest of it should be in the ground, so it will develop a strong root system.
Okay. And then how does the 7 Dust and the diatomaceous earth, does it give you directions for how much to use on how much? Because there were some questions about bugs and also about squirrels.
All of that information will be on this handout that Alicia generated. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
For the different plants and seed varieties, it'll tell you.
All right. Do you have to rotate every year, or can it go into the same place for a couple of years and then rotate?
With these Japanese tomato rings, I would go 2 years because it's just so hard to move them and rebuild that bed in them.
Okay.
But that's not a good idea. The book tells you to rotate each year, not to plant back in the same spot. But I did that, but now I've given up the rings, so I'm moving my tomatoes each year.
Okay. So the handout that he's talking about, I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys. There's a planting chart as well as a handout about gardening in Georgia. So that might be helpful to you guys. And if you happen to get on late, you have access to the replay. That'll be given out 24 hours from today, and you can watch it at any time. Is there any other questions that we have not addressed that anybody would like to ask? No, there's a little delay between when I ask and when you guys can type. You might have to start giving tours there, Mr. Dan. You've got everybody just in awe.
Just tell them to bring a little fried chicken with them when they come.
Oh, someone said they already ordered that book you mentioned on eBay while we were here.
Oh, really?
What?
Okay.
Yep. Okay. What kind of wrap around the tomato plants before planting?
That was just a piece of. You can use regular newspaper. Just it makes a shield around that root system to keep the nematodes and the grub worms from.
So do you do that on just tomato plants, or do you do that on like all of your, nightshade family plants?
Well, I do it primarily on my tomato plants. I can't recall in reading the gardening book how important it is, like for pepper plants. I don't think I've ever put them around anything but my tomatoes. That seems to be the thing that. And the grub worms will get them. You can plant them out here and come back the next day and you'll think a bird or somebody has come in your yard and just pulled them up. The plant will be just gone.
Yes.
It's interesting. But that grub worm or that nematode has a way to just take that whole plant away. So.
All right. Somebody wants to know, are you willing to give out your contact info for future questions that may arise?
Sure.
Okay, we will get that out to you guys. We'll have Alicia send that out. It seemed like there was one more question and I forgot already. Let me look. If you guys remember what it is and I haven't yet, you can put it in here again.
Be sure and tell those male gardeners that they got to get them a wide brim hat. I've already had the dermatologist cutting off part of my ear because of cancer. So the girls might not have to worry about it, but the men need to buy them a $15 wide brim hat.
You can still get cancer. My mama has had lots of skin cancer taken off of her. So the other question was, what do you do for squirrels and chipmunks?
Oh, well, I don't know that the biggest thing that comes from my friends with blueberries, they said they have a hard time growing blueberries because the birds eat them up. I've never had a real problem. I'm sure I see a lot of birds in mine, but I guess I grow enough for me and the birds.
Okay, so just
like I said, we put away 20 gallons last year out of the blueberries.
Oh my gosh.
Now the chipmunks and squirrels, I have a problem with them too. They'll come out there and they'll scratch around and dig your plant out. I just throw some of this diatomaceous or something around it just to try to keep them off of it. It's the only thing I know to do.
So how many blueberry plants do you have to get that much blueberries?
I've got 40.
Oh my heck. Okay. Mr. Terry, he wrapped just newspaper around the tomatoes when he planted them. Any other questions? All right, Mr. Dan, I think that is about it. Thank you so much. We learned a lot from you.
Tell everybody I said Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas in July. Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you. All right.
Talk to you guys. See you guys next time. Remember, our next ed event is going to be March 25th. It's wealth transfer. Then we have risk management and the food truck in April. And then we have 2 double token events, one on the 13th at Natalia's and one at the 15th at Props. And remember that we're doing our drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card for referrals beginning of April that you've got to the end of the month to get in on. So thank you guys. Till next time.